I wasn't prepared. No one could be prepared for this. The entrance to the catacombs beneath St. Anne's wasn't just hidden, it was buried, sealed off by stone, by time, by something more than human. Yet here I was, prying it open, feeling the chill of air that hadn't been breathed in centuries, smelling rot that never left. The steps were steep, slick with moisture. Each one felt like it descended not just into the earth, but into something far worse. My lantern flickered, shadows crawling up the walls, writhing like they were alive. The darkness down there wasn't normal. It was thick, tangible, wrapping itself around me, pressing against my skin like cold, dead hands. And then I heard it. Soft, at first. The faintest scratching coming from deeper within. Nails against stone. Slow, deliberate. No one had been down here for hundreds of years. Right? The further I went, the worse the air became. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong. Heavy. Each breath felt like inhaling death itself. Something rancid. Something alive. The walls weren't just damp anymore. They were bleeding. Thin, dark lines of liquid oozed from the stone, trailing down, pooling on the floor. I stepped over them, but each step felt like it was sinking into something soft, wet, like walking on flesh. And then the whispers started. Not just one voice, but many. Dozens. Hundreds. They slithered through the air, soft at first, then louder, like they were all speaking at once. Begging, pleading, accusing. Their words twisted in and out of one another, forming a chorus of the damned. I stopped, my lantern shaking in my hand. The walls were shifting, bulging, as if something was trying to break free from inside. And the whispers, they weren't just coming from the walls, they were coming from below, from the ground, from the very air around me. The tunnel opened into a chamber, a space larger than anything I'd imagined could exist beneath the earth. My lantern barely pierced the darkness. The shadows in the corners were thick, too thick, like a living mass that seemed to pulse with life or death. Something was moving in the dark. I could hear it, a slithering, crawling sound, like something dragging itself across the stone. And it wasn't alone. There were many of them. I could feel them, the weight of their eyes, if they had eyes, watching me from the shadows, waiting for me to slip. I took a step forward. Something cold brushed against my ankle, wet and slimy. I froze, but when I looked down, there was nothing there. Only darkness and the cold. The shadows seemed to stretch, to reach out toward me, long fingers creeping across the floor, closer and closer. And then the air grew impossibly cold, and I saw them. Figures, emerging from the shadows. Pale, emaciated, their skin stretched tight over bone, their mouths hanging open in silent screams. But their eyes were hollow, empty voids. Yet they saw me. At the center of the chamber was an altar, ancient and crumbling, covered in blackened blood. The floor around it was littered with bones. Human bones, piled high, some still wet, like they'd just been stripped clean. The stench was overwhelming, thick, suffocating, clinging to my skin. Above the altar, suspended by chains, was something worse. A figure, its body twisted and deformed, skin peeling away in strips, hung there, twitching. It had no eyes, just empty, black sockets that oozed thick, dark liquid. Its mouth was sewn shut, but it still moved, writhing in agony. I stepped closer, drawn by some unseen force. My heart pounded in my chest, my blood freezing in my veins. And then, without warning, the figure's mouth tore open. Stitches snapped, flesh ripped, and from its throat came the most horrifying sound, a scream so loud, so raw, it shook the walls. The altar itself began to tremble. Something beneath it was moving, pushing upward, straining against the stone, like it was trying to escape. The ground split open, and from beneath the altar, they came. Crawling, dragging themselves up from the pit, dozens of figures, their bodies twisted, broken, covered in blood and filth. Their eyes, milky white and dead, locked onto me. Their hands, skeletal and sharp, reached out as they crawled closer, closer. I tried to run, but the ground beneath me was moving, shifting like it was alive. The chamber was closing in, the walls crawling with something dark, something that pulsed and writhed like it had a heartbeat. I couldn't breathe. The air was too thick, too heavy, filled with the scent of rot and decay. One of them reached me. Its hand, cold and wet, latched onto my ankle, pulling, dragging me toward the pit. Its mouth opened, a black hole that stretched impossibly wide, and from within, I saw something. Something moving in the depths of its throat. Something alive. They were all over me now, pulling me down, their bony hands gripping, tearing at my skin. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. The shadows in the room moved like liquid, flowing toward me, wrapping around me, dragging me down. I was sinking into the floor, into the pit beneath the altar. The darkness consumed me, wrapping me in cold, suffocating black. The figures were everywhere, their hands clawing at my flesh, their dead eyes staring into me, through me. As I was pulled deeper into the pit, I saw it. The thing beneath. It was vast, too large to comprehend, its body a mass of writhing, shifting flesh, covered in eyes, mouths, limbs. It opened one of its many mouths, and I could feel the pull, the hunger. I was the sacrifice. The whispers had called me here, and now they were silent. The last thing I felt was the cold, wet grip of the creature's mouth, closing around me, swallowing me whole. And then there was nothing.